So there we were, and she's like huddled on the floor in her bathroom naked, and me,
and
Nick,
they're
and
all
Michael.
ganging up on me, and I'm naked.
And we're unloading on her. Then we just went.
You'd think that by now, we as a species would have pretty much figured out sex, what with Hollywood and the internet, but actually, your sexpertise may not be all it's engorged to be. For example, did you know that aphrodisiacs definitely don't boost your sex drive? When you think of activities that get you in the mood for a nice romp, you probably think of nibbling your lover's ear, or kissing their neck, or playing the opening drum solo to Hot for Teacher on their butt cheeks.
Many happy returns.
But there's an entire multi-million-dollar industry that says you can skip all that boring stuff just so long as you're willing to gulp down some weird concoction. What? And you're probably skeptical of that, but come on, at least a few of these sexual boosters have an effect, right? There's no way that aphrodisiacs just literally don't exist at all, but actually, aphrodisiacs just literally don't exist at all. Not a single food or drug has ever been shown to have any sort of positive effect on a person's sex drive, at least according to the FDA. Thankfully, classic Motown still works every time. But even worse, the FDA is once again spoiling everyone's fun by pointing out that a lot of those herbal aphrodisiacs are actually really freaking bad for you. Back in 1999, 4 people died from trying aphrodisiacs. But alright, so what about the everyday sexy foods like chocolate? Well, scientists in Italy tested this by creating something called the Female Sexual Function Index, because of course they did, and sorry ladies, but it turns out that chocolate does precisely squat to crank up your want-a-bone meter. Well, at least if you've got a young, single body, you're probably still having more sex than your grandparents with or without aphrodisiacs, right? Wrong.
Cry about that, you dirty old bitch.
Married and older people actually have more sex. As any stand-up comedian can tell you, all your happy, fun, sexy time completely dies with marriage, and it only gets worse with time. As you hit your golden years, sex becomes a dusty, ancient memory. Except, actually, that's not true at all. Here's a handy chart, because remember, charts are widely regarded to be the sluttiest type of document.
Well, it's a long
See, 50% of young married couples are having sex 2 to 3 times a week. Meanwhile, more than 50% of young single people haven't even had sex in the past year. Now, I know what you're about to say. What we really want to know is how often old people are screwing each other. Well, you're in luck.
You never had it so good.
One horrible study sought to figure out just that, because scientists won't be content until you picture your own grandparents going at it. And it turns out that a whopping 75% of the senior citizens they asked to participate were connoisseurs of dancing the wrinkly tango. In fact, there's so much brittle pelvic grinding running rampant that it's causing an STD problem among the elderly. But don't run to the bathroom screaming just yet, you'll miss the tile about old people going down on each other. That's right, more than half of 57 to 75-year-olds have engaged in oral sex in the past year. So there you have it, kiddos. It's actually more likely than not, sometime within the past year, your dear grandma has sucked herself some wiener. You're welcome.
God, I miss cocaine.
And at this point, you're probably like, fine, I can live with that as long as you don't tell me inbreeding between cousins is actually pretty much fine.
Well, that is fortunate.
You might think it's common knowledge that having sex with your cousin results in a dim-witted child sporting extra appendages, and you might not completely understand the science, but you know that something makes the chromosomes go all screwy. Well, actually, if inbreeding between cousins was actually that terrible for the gene pool, you wouldn't expect it to be so biologically successful, evolutionarily speaking, meaning that cousins couldn't have as many children as unrelated couples, but in fact, breeding cousins are actually more biologically successful than strangers.
You know nothing.
6 times.
Why is this? Well, no subject is too taboo for scientists to poke with needles, and it turns out that reproducing with your cousin only increases the risk of birth defects by 2 to 3%. That's the same increased risk faced by a woman who has a child at the age of 41. Does a 41-year-old woman having a kid weird you out? Well, according to science, banging your cousin isn't any weirder than that.
It's supposed to be my time.
And if you take a close look at our timeline, we humans actually have a long and rich history of boinking our own relatives. In fact, one Rutgers anthropology professor estimates that 80% of every single married couple in human history were second cousins or even more closely related. So, do with that what you will.